I have a problem, and this is an intervention. Over the past few years, I've been saving up all my tiny scraps of fabric and yarn because Delulu me thought, oh, well, let's just keep them. I'm gonna use them later. They might be helpful. This was a lie. And all I ended up with were bags and bags and bags of scraps. Something needs to change, so I'm gonna try using up these scraps. And I say try because I've put in place a few rules for myself. Whatever I make has to be professional level quality, something that I'd be willing to gift someone or put up in my shop. I can't buy new things to make whatever I want to make. Buying more stuff just so I can use up all my stuff feels kind of counterintuitive. And I can only make one of each item, meaning I can't rely on one trusty project and make that over and over again to use up my stash. If I can make, I don't know, like 5 different items out of my scraps, I think I'll be pretty happy with that. Regardless, this is going to be a real test of my creativity and crafting abilities because no craft is off the table. This is the Destash Diaries. Welcome to episode 1. Okay, Destash Diaries, day 1. So I'm using up this piece of monk's cloth, and you're probably wondering why there's like a bunch of fabric around it, around the edge. It's because the scrap is so small. I took an inventory of all the fabric and all of the yarn and all of just the scraps that I have left over. And a lot of the fabric scraps that I have are just very small. In fact, they're too small for even my smallest gripper frame. So my solution was to use more scrap fabric and do a little zigzag stitch around my monk's cloth so that it would be big enough to put onto my gripper frame. I also wrote up like a big fat list of all of the different ideas that I had for this series, and scraps permitting, maybe I'll be able to do all of them. And like I said before, no craft is off the table. But since most of my crafting supplies are punch needle supplies, I'm going to start off with that. It's going to be a relatively safe start, so we're going to start off with a punch needle wool hanging. Okay, wait, this plan failed because the stitches are coming off of my monk's cloth here. But you know what? It's fine. It's whatever. Everything's fine. We will just not move this at all. I have no pattern. I'm just going to do this freehand. Okay, well, there is a pattern, but my pattern is based off of this floral design called, oh my god, what is it called again?
Motif pour broderie.
Basically, in English, that translates to embroidery designs. It's this really, really old book from archive.org. I found it while I was just doing some research on old craft books, old fiber art books, and it has just a bunch of these really cool designs, and one of them really inspired me, so I'm going to use that specific design for this piece. But I'm going to draw it completely freehand. Like, I'm not going to do the whole printing out, tracing thing. We'll just go at it the best we can. Honestly, I started this series because I just feel like I have a huge creative block right now, and like I've been working on so many different things that at this point I feel like I've used up so many of my ideas, and I'm hoping that doing this destash will help refuel my creativity while also using up all of these scraps that I've been gathering up. I'm also doing this series because every time I go on youtube.com and I look at some of the other fiber artists that are uploading videos, there are so many yarn hauls and fabric hauls, and it's just like consume, consume, consume. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I love yarn, I love fabric, I love all of it. But like, to make your content exclusively just yarn hauls and fabric hauls, like, it's just so much. And on one end, I get it because the genre of YouTube that we're in, to make the content that we want to make, it takes a while because basically every single fiber art is like a slow craft. So it could take weeks or months to finish something, edit the video, and get it uploaded. So I get why some fiber artists do these sorts of like in between kind of like filler videos just so that the algorithm gets fed. Because for those of you that don't know how YouTube works on the creator side, from what I understand, the algorithm really likes it when you just keep uploading regularly. So doing hauls and things like that, I can understand it as a way to keep the algorithm fed. But on the other hand, oh my goodness, I just feel like it's like so much. It's like, where do you put all the yarn that you end up buying? I would love to see the storage system that some of the other creators have. No tea, no shade. I would just be so curious because I don't even have that much yarn myself and I struggle with keeping it all organized. But yeah, instead of doing those sorts of filler videos, I thought it'd be really cool to do kind of the opposite. So using up what I already have. And luckily for me, like my scraps aren't super duper big. So it means that I can make a lot of small projects that don't take too long. Are they gonna be technically impressive? Maybe not. If you guys wanna see more technically impressive things, that sort of stuff takes like months for me to like create, film, edit, upload. So you'll have to make do with this for now. Okay, so we're done drawing our pattern. Slay. It looks kind of jank, but you know what? Whatever. It's fine. We can work with it. Now, to kind of spice this piece up a little bit, I don't want to use like traditional colors, meaning I don't want to use like green for the leaves or pink for the flowers. I kind of want to mix things up a little bit. And I've got a ton of scrap yarn to do that. So let me grab some colors. Okay, so I've got some golds and yellows. I'm probably gonna use those for the flowers, and then some brown, which I'll use for the stem. And then yes, I do have green. This is actually from my bag of scraps that I had, at least this lighter one. So at least I'm using that up. But I won't be using it for the leaves. I'm gonna combine the lighter green with the darker green and use it for the background in an alternating fashion. And then for the leaves, I'm going to use white. So I've got an Oxford 13 fine punch needle. We're just gonna get started. And by the way, all of these yarns are from Briggs & Little Heritage, so they're a worsted weight yarn. I think I know all of the colors off of the top of my head. So the light yellow, I think it's called Yellow WO. The gold is literally called gold. And then the brown is, I believe it's copper. And then we've got jade, and then we've got light green. And then we've got bleached white. I don't tend to buy a lot of colored yarn anymore, like dyed yarn. I tend to buy just blanks of Heritage or Briggs & Little Atlantic or Briggs & Little Super because I do have ways to dye my own yarn now, so I don't necessarily need to buy dyed yarns, but there are some things that I can't dye myself at home. The Yellow WO, so the light yellow, has a little bit of like a heather to it, which is something that I can't do by myself unless I learn how to spin yarn, which I do want to do in like a future video, but that's for another time. I also don't trust myself when I'm dyeing sometimes because I still consider myself like a fairly beginner dyer. So my dye lots, even if I use the same amount of dye, they still turn out slightly different sometimes. So buying the yarn colors I need is good because they're all dyed. Like whenever I buy them, I make sure to get the same dye lot so they look the same. But anyways, it feels so good to be punching again. I haven't punched for a couple of weeks now. Again, because I've been going through my little creative block moment, my creative block era. And because I'm using like a fine yarn, like a worsted weight yarn, I don't have to worry about my stitch spacing 24/7 because the way to go for fine yarns like this is just to punch in every single hole of your monk's cloth and then skip a row of holes in between rows of stitches. So literally mindless work. So I'm excited to get started on another project. Okay, folks, it is 9:50 at night. I'm speaking really quietly right now because everyone else is sleeping, and this is what I've accomplished so far. As you can see, it's not much. Tomorrow, I'm hoping to finish up the entire flower, finish up the branches, and if things go well, get started on the leaves. Maybe that's overly ambitious, but hey, here I am on YouTube, making content about a super niche craft and using up all my scraps and hoping that I become famous. So let's just be Delulu. Let's just be Delulu and manifest a good day 2. Okay, it is day 2 of Destash Diaries. Let's keep going. For this piece, I'm basically just using the fine punch needle, and I'm only using the 13 fine. I love the look of just one punch needle being used for a piece, but also I'm kind of feeling lazy right now, and I don't feel like grabbing my other punch needles and doing the whole switcheroo type deal. So I'm just using one. And there's something really satisfying to me about using a fine punch needle and going in every single hole of your monk's cloth. Oh, it is so satisfying. When I see people in my life, like my family or my friends, that are stressed out about something, I just want to hand them a gripper frame, some fabric, some yarn, and a punch needle, and then just let them go at it for 30 minutes. They don't even have to make anything. Just let them stitch back and forth in straight lines. Oh my god. I just feel like doing that would help just a little bit. But maybe that's just me and my biased opinion. I hope everyone here is appreciating all of the different camera angles I'm using right now. Most of the time, I just do the good old-fashioned overhead camera, just so everyone can see what I'm doing and see everything all at once. But I have read that viewers appreciate different angles, so hopefully this is good. The most challenging part about filming for me is getting good angles and making sure that I don't show my face. Because not showing my face is content. It builds anticipation. Will she show her face? Won't she show her face? Who knows? But that's a topic for another video. Okay, so we're done with the flower. Let's move on to the branches. Now, like I said before, I'm using Briggs & Little Heritage in copper, and I believe this is a new colorway that Briggs & Little put out. Briggs & Little is a very small Canadian mill. Small in that they don't have a lot of employees, they're family owned. They have a very limited selection of colors. So when they do incorporate a new colorway into their selection of yarns, it's a big deal. Also, if they change one of their colorways, that's a big deal. Because super interesting recent change by them, they changed their pink yarn from like a bubblegum pink to more of a magenta, which is pretty sweet. I like it. It's also fun because I have a full unopened skein of the original pink colorway, so I feel like it would be funny to just keep it and not open it and see how much it sells on eBay or something like that. Speaking of yarn on eBay, now I'm on social media a lot, and I'm aware that a lot of Americans buy their yarn and fabric and notions from a place called Joann's, which I heard is like closing or it's shutting down like permanently. I don't know. And I've heard that there's like a subsection of people in this group that are buying up remaining stocks of yarn from Joann stores that are shutting down and just buying everything that's left and then marking it up a whole bunch and selling it on eBay, which is wild to me. Like, please pick an original hustle for once in your life. And respectfully, unless someone has a project that they need to finish and they want like a very specific yarn from Joann's that's no longer available because Joann's is gone, paying like $50 for acrylic is ridiculous. Honestly, my hot take is that big box craft stores have overpriced yarn. I do think I'm also lucky because I'm Canadian and we still have a little bit of a fibre industry here, and there are still a lot of independent family-owned wool mills, so I'm lucky to be able to get wool for super cheap. Like this Briggs & Little was $6 per skein. I don't think I've bought Briggs & Little for anything more than $9, which is pretty nice. Alrighty, day 3 of destash diaries, and we have accomplished a lot. We finished the branches, we outlined all the leaves, and even filled in some of them. I did get kind of bored with filling the rest of them in, so I'm switching it up and just punching the background, as you can see here. I'm alternating between the jade and the light green heritage yarns to make the background more dynamic. Maybe it looks a little bit silly from the backside, but from the front it's looking pretty cool. Now you might be looking at our foundation fabric here and seeing all of the gaps, in that you can see the foundation fabric showing between the stitches. You gotta trust me on this. On the front, it looks completely filled in. If we filled in every single row and every single hole of our monk's cloth, our punch needle piece would be ridiculously overcrowded. Like it would start bulging. Because I've been punching for so long now, I've kind of just developed a sixth sense of what spacing is good and what spacing is bad. If you're starting out with this craft and you're not really sure what you're doing, using a stitch gauge is a good idea. If you buy an Oxford needle, it'll come with a stitch gauge. It'll be like a piece of cardstock with a 1 by 1 inch square cut out of it, and it'll have information on that piece of cardstock of what stitch spacing is good for which needles and which yarns. It's easily something you could DIY at home. The fun thing about Briggs & Little yarns is that they're minimally processed, so they won't be like those fancy merino superwashes that you see at a boutique yarn store, but they're great for things like rugs because they can handle high traffic and just a lot of wear and tear. The only thing though is that when I'm making something to gift, or once I start doing things like punch needle kits, I'm gonna have to start picking out all of the hay and grass from the yarn that I use for my gifts or my kits, because I feel like people are not going to appreciate having to pick out hay from their yarn. But who knows? Personally, I kind of just deal with it and hope that it comes out by itself by just using the item regularly or after a wash, but that's just me. Okay, so we are just about done. So here is what this wall hanging looks like from the back, and from the front, yeah, it's messy. This is how all punch needle pieces look on the front once you're done punching. I'm gonna have to go in, do snipping and poking and all of that stuff to get the loops in the right place and to get rid of all of these ends. Okay, full transparency, folks. I've already finished snipping and poking all of my ends, and I'm recording this after. I only have like maybe 2 clips of me doing this because it is tedious work. This is the one disadvantage of using fine yarn rather than a thicker yarn for punch needle, because I do find that there's just a lot more ends that you need to poke around and cut off and move into the right place. This took a lot of time, more time than anything you're going to see in this video. I ended up with 3 or 4 handfuls of ends that I clipped off. So just to give you a scale of how much I had to do to get each loop in the right place. But the one upside of this is that the fabric strips I sewed onto my monk's cloth stayed surprisingly intact. Obviously there's parts here and there where the zigzag stitch didn't attach fully, so you can see the monk's cloth is starting to fray in those sections. But really, that's no big deal. We still have so much space left over to do some hemming. But before that, what I'm gonna do is steam press this project so it lies flat, settles any uneven loops that are still remaining after snipping and poking everything. Some punchers hate this step because it's kind of similar to blocking in knitting and crochet, but I like it personally, just because I like the smell of minimally processed yarn. And also because I like the sizzling sound the iron makes when it hits the wet towel. But yeah, we're going to wait for our project to dry out and then we can start hemming. Okay, hemming. You've seen me hem a mitered corner a countless number of times, and you're going to watch me do it again. You're going to watch me do it again while I yap at you about how I want to switch up this wall hanging and make it a little... Is the right word spicy? No. I want to make this wall hanging functional. So instead of it being just an art piece that you put up on your wall, I think it would be a really cool idea to add a pocket behind it so you could store things like important documents, maybe like a spare set of keys, some cash, something like that. And at first, I was kind of just thinking to sew on a pocket, so just like a little flap of fabric, and you can just stick things in. But I feel like if you do that and you add enough things in, or not even just things, if you just add one thing that's too heavy or too big, it might fall out. And I'm thinking maybe we add a zipper instead, because I do have a couple of zippers lying around somewhere in my house. I don't even know if they're the right color. I don't know if they match this project, but hey, we are destashing here. I'm not gonna go out and buy a matching zipper for this project. It goes against the rules and the spirit of what destashing is about. So I'm gonna go look for those zippers, and I'll just pick out the one that matches the best. Okay, besties, we are done hemming. I think I'm gonna add another lining on top of this so that if I put things in, they won't be directly touching the loops. Because if you put something like maybe your passport or just some documents folded up, it'll be fine. But if you're putting like a spare set of keys and you're taking them out and you're putting them back in again, they might catch onto the loops and the loops might come out. I think the chances of that happening are fairly unlikely, but I don't want to take the risk. So I think adding a lining is a good idea. I have a bunch of white cotton flannel here. I promise I didn't buy any of this. I just have it lying around. So what I'm going to do is iron it and then sew it onto the back of the wall hanging using an invisible stitch. Fun fact, the needle that I'm using here to do the invisible stitch is actually from a workshop run by Aruna Kunraj from Buku. Some of you might know who she is. She's like a fiber artist, and she's one of the people that actually started the new wave of punch needle. And she's one of the first people that I saw making punch needle things when I was just starting out with this craft. She came to my local arts center to do a little visible mending workshop, and I dragged my friends along to the workshop because I was like, I don't want to go alone. And then they came with me, and it was an hour-long workshop, but we were shocked because she was showing us all of these stitches and she was doing them so quickly, and we were just trying to keep up with her. We were at like step 1 while she was at like step 9. But the workshop was great, and we got this needle. It's actually a sashiko needle. We got it as a little freebie take home for attending the workshop, and it is really, really sharp. So that's why I like using it. But I keep pricking my fingers, and during the workshop, I also kept pricking my fingers. Honestly, for this series, it might be a good idea for me to put up a counter for how many times I keep pricking my fingers. A finger prick counter, if you will. Speaking of visible mending, I think it would be a really cool idea to use some of the scraps I have left over to visible mend, but honestly, I have nothing to mend at the moment, so maybe in a future episode, when I do have things that are ripped or torn, I can use them for mending. So I'm just using some really cheap white cotton thread here. I'm not using button and craft thread to sew this lining because while having the lining is important, it's not essential that the lining is sewn on super duper tight. What does need to be sewn on super duper tight is the pocket. And I have a little zipper here that's about 7 inches, and I'm glad I did have a green one among my stash of zippers. It's not the exact green that's in the wall hanging, but you know what? That's fine. It's good enough. I'm not really sure how I'm gonna attach this to the fabric, but here's what I'm thinking. I'll make 2 marks here for the front, so for the beginning and the end of the zipper, and then I'll cut a little line between those 2 ends and then slits at both of the ends so that the fabric there's a little bit of a seam allowance. I'm not an expert sewist. I actually think I'm pretty mid at sewing. Actually, mid is overestimating my abilities. I'm like an overly confident beginner. Certainly not good enough to properly attach a zipper onto a piece of fabric. But you know what? It's fine. Everything's fine. Maybe using a sewing machine for this would have been a better idea, but I am so lazy. My machine is so heavy and I do not want to take it out and get it all set up. So we are sewing the zipper by hand. And honestly, it's good practice for me. Okay, so the zipper is a little bit puckered. It's not horrible. I thought it would be a lot worse. Let's just sew up the bottom part of this fabric and see how it looks. Okay, that's decent. Certainly not expert level. I definitely need to improve my sewing skills. Maybe that's another goal for 2025. Like going to a workshop, learning from someone who is way better than I am at this moment. But you know what? The zipper is usable, so we'll go with that. Now what I'm gonna do here is use some stronger button and craft thread and sew the pocket onto the wall hanging using an invisible stitch. Obviously this takes a while because I'm really digging into the monk's cloth right beside the stitches so you don't see any of the monk's cloth showing. That's how you get that nice smooth finish, and it takes forever. It takes so long that most people don't even do it. It took me months to figure out how to do this properly because while I was learning to do punch needle wearables, the struggle with them was that I didn't want people to have their skin touching the rough wool because it's pretty rough and people might be sensitive towards it. So obviously a lining is a great solution. But the hard part was to to figure out how to sew on the lining without having any foundation fabric showing. It literally took me 2 tries and then I got it. And the funny part is that I had no reference for how to do this because there were so few people that were doing punch needle rug hooking and even fewer people that were doing punch needle rug hooking wearables and apparel. Even now, there's maybe like 2 or 3 people that I know, at least online, who are doing this stuff. And back when I was learning, I was like zooming into their Instagram photos and I was trying to figure out how they were doing that. What stitches were they using? So it took a lot of experimentation. A lot of experimental things in the fiber arts are just trial and error. That's what experimentation is. It's important to not get discouraged when something doesn't go right. And you know what? Despite all of my sewing flops, I slay at the invisible stitch. Okay, so we're done sewing the pocket, and the zipper is a little crooked, but it is fully functional. Maybe I wouldn't put this up on my shop, but certainly I could give it as a gift. Now, the next thing I want to do here is make this hangable. So I have a scrap piece of wool fabric here that's actually matching some of the yarn that we used for the wall hanging, which is great. I should really be using my sewing machine for this, but me and my chungus brain are telling me to just sew it by hand, so let's just do that. And here is the finished wall hanging. It's super cute, super functional. Maybe the one thing I would do, possibly a little differently, is make the zipper vertical, because to access the secret pocket, you have to first take the wall hanging off the wall and then unzip the zipper. But if I did a vertical zipper, you could kind of just reach around and use the zipper and store whatever you need to store without removing the wall hanging from the wall. And the one thing that I was planning on doing for the wall hanging, but I didn't end up completing, was doing a crochet fringe. Because I had this Icelandic wool yarn that was like lace weight. I was planning to use it for lace crochet, but I fumbled so bad. Forget lace crochet, I forgot how to crochet in general. So I kept trying and I kept messing up and I was like, this is annoying. But it's also an opportunity to maybe use this yarn as another destash opportunity and learn how to crochet again. So maybe in episode 2 of Destash Diaries, I might just do that. But until then, this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe. Until next time.